When Shohei Ohtani joined the Dodgers, the story was supposed to be simple. A global superstar. A historic contract. A championship franchise. A perfect fit. That was the headline. But headlines are easy. The real story starts after the cameras leave. Because once Ohtani put on that Dodgers uniform, he did not just become the most famous player in the building. He became the center of gravity inside it. Every expectation got heavier, every decision felt bigger, every ordinary day stopped being ordinary. And that is the part most people never really think about. Fans see the home runs, they see the highlights, they see the smile, the calm body language, the way he moves through the game as if pressure does not belong in the same frame as him. But pressure is everywhere around Shohei Ohtani. And maybe for the first time in his career, it is not just pressure to perform. It is pressure to represent, pressure to lead without speaking too much, pressure to stay larger than the moment without letting the moment swallow the team around him. Because on the Dodgers, Ohtani is not just another star. He is the story before the first pitch. And that changes everything. The easiest mistake to make with Ohtani is to think his greatness makes things simpler. It does not. It makes things more complicated. Because when a player becomes this important, the clubhouse changes around him whether anyone says it out loud or not. A normal player joins a team and tries to fit into the structure. Ohtani joined the Dodgers, and the structure had to expand around him. Not only because of what he does on the field, but because of what he means to the franchise, to the league, to the media, to the business of baseball itself. MLB itself has described his impact as something massive not only for the Dodgers, but for the sport as a whole. That kind of presence creates a different kind of pressure. Now every roster move exists in a bigger spotlight, every lineup choice gets discussed longer, every injury update becomes national news, every quiet reaction becomes something people try to decode. And through all of that, Ohtani still has to do the hardest thing in sports. Play like none of it matters. That is what makes him so fascinating. Not just the numbers, not just the power, not just the speed, not just the arm. It is the discipline. Because the Dodgers did not simply sign a superstar. They signed a player who carries fame like armor. And yet even armor gets heavy. That is what makes this chapter of Ohtani's career so compelling. Not whether he can hit a ball 450 feet. We already know he can. Not whether he can dominate a game. We already know that too. The real question is this. What happens when the most talented player in baseball becomes the emotional center of a team that expects nothing less than a title? That is a harder role. A lonelier role. A more exhausting role. And you can feel it in the way the Dodgers talk about him. They do not talk about him like a normal player. They talk about him like a force that changes the room. Sometimes that shows up in obvious ways, like performance. Sometimes it shows up in quieter ways, like presence. There was the moment Ohtani gifted luxury watches to Dodgers teammates, along with a message that said, "Let's three-peat." It was a gesture, yes, but also a signal. He was not arriving as a detached celebrity. He was investing in the room. That matters more than people realize. Because stars can divide a clubhouse just as easily as they can elevate one. They can become distant, untouchable, too large to connect to the ordinary rhythm of the team. But Ohtani's public image inside baseball has often moved in the opposite direction. He can feel mythic from the outside and deeply team-oriented from the inside. That balance is rare. And it is one reason the pressure around him is so unique. He is expected to be iconic without becoming isolating. He is expected to lead without overwhelming everyone else. He is expected to be the face of the franchise while still behaving like just another teammate in a room full of elite professionals. That sounds manageable when you say it quickly. It is not. Because baseball clubhouses are sensitive ecosystems. Talent does not remove tension, it amplifies it. And when one player sits at the center of so many expectations, everyone around him starts reacting to that reality in ways both subtle and obvious. Managers feel it. Teammates feel it. Front offices feel it. Even routine baseball decisions start carrying extra emotional weight when Ohtani is involved, or when they happen in the larger orbit of what Ohtani means to the organization. That is why his relationship with Dave Roberts matters. Not because it needs to be dramatic. Not because every interaction has to become some hidden power story. It matters because Roberts is one of the people tasked with translating all of this pressure into daily baseball decisions. And that is not easy. There are some stars you manage. Ohtani is bigger than that. With him, you are managing talent, recovery, timing, media attention, international spotlight, teammate dynamics, and franchise expectation all at once. Even simple things become stories. When Ohtani was not in the lineup in a recent moment, Roberts literally joked about Ohtani's reaction, reenacting it in a playful way. On the surface, it was funny. Underneath, it also showed how closely everyone tracks even the smallest Ohtani-related decision. That is life around him now. Nothing is neutral. That is what the outside world often misunderstands. People think pressure on Ohtani only exists during games. But the real pressure starts much earlier. It starts in expectations. It starts the moment fans believe every season with Ohtani should become history. And to be fair, he keeps giving them reasons to believe that. This is the same player who became the first 50-50 player in Major League history, turning an already impossible standard into something even more absurd. This is the same player who keeps rewriting what a baseball superstar is supposed to look like. And that creates a dangerous cycle. The more extraordinary he becomes, the less ordinary he is allowed to be. A rough week? That becomes a discussion. A day off? That becomes a headline. A small mechanical issue? That becomes a segment. A slight shift in tone? That becomes a theory. The player benefits from the spotlight. But he also pays for it. And maybe nowhere is that more obvious than in the Dodgers phase of his career, because now the expectation is no longer just individual greatness. Now it is collective payoff. Now people are not asking, can Shohei Ohtani be historic? That question is dead. Now they are asking, can the Dodgers turn Shohei Ohtani into championships? And that is a very different burden. Because championships complicate the emotional contract between a superstar and a franchise. Home runs are personal brilliance. Titles are shared responsibility. That is where Ohtani's Dodgers story becomes more layered than his Angels story ever was. With the Angels, the tragedy was often about waste. With the Dodgers, the tension is about conversion. How do you convert historic talent into the result everyone assumes should follow? How do you build a team around a once-in-a-century player without making the team emotionally dependent on him? How do you let him be extraordinary without making every other player feel secondary? Those are not easy questions. And the truth is, there is no perfect answer. Because Ohtani's greatness naturally changes the emotional hierarchy of a clubhouse. When he homered for the first time as a Dodger, it felt like a milestone not only for him, but for the entire brand of the team. It was the symbolic moment when the partnership became real on the field. That is the weight the Dodgers live with now. Not just how is Shohei playing, but what does Shohei's season mean for everybody else? His success lifts the room, his routines influence the room, his health affects the room, his return to pitching changes the shape of the team entirely. That last part is especially important. Because Ohtani is not just a superstar hitter who happens to pitch. His return to the mound is one of the most important moving pieces in the entire Dodgers machine. MLB tracked his pitching progression closely, from live hitters at Dodger Stadium to the broader timeline of his return. And that creates another layer of pressure. Not just, can Ohtani be great? But, how much of the Dodgers' long-term ceiling depends on Ohtani being both things again? That is a terrifying sentence for the rest of baseball. But inside the Dodgers, it also becomes a management challenge. Because every two-way step forward creates excitement and risk. Every bullpen session means hope, every pitching update means scrutiny, every sign of progress raises the same silent question. How much can this team ask from one player before the burden becomes unreasonable? That is the paradox of Shohei Ohtani. He is so gifted that people stop measuring what is fair. They start measuring what is possible. And possible, with him, almost always sounds unreasonable. That is why the most interesting part of Ohtani's Dodgers era is not the stat line. It is the atmosphere. It is the way an entire organization bends toward the idea of maximizing him without overloading him. It is the way teammates have to remain themselves while sharing space with a player who can accidentally make normal greatness look invisible. It is the way Roberts has to keep the room balanced even when one player's orbit is bigger than the sport's usual logic. And it is the way Ohtani himself keeps trying to appear steady through all of it. That may be his most underrated skill. Calm. Not fake calm, not corporate calm, competitive calm. The kind that lets a room breathe. Because if Ohtani were louder, more volatile, more publicly emotional, the pressure around him might become overwhelming. Instead, he often absorbs attention without reflecting chaos back into the room. That is leadership too. Not the speech kind. Not the camera kind. The steadiness kind. And yet even that steadiness adds to his mystique. Because when a player is that composed, people begin to assume he is beyond pressure. He is not. No one is. And that is the heart of this whole story. Shohei Ohtani is not fascinating because he is pressure-proof. He is fascinating because he keeps functioning while pressure keeps multiplying. Historic expectations. Two-way expectations, championship expectations, commercial expectations, cultural expectations, legacy expectations. All of that sits on him now. Every season. Every trip. Every game. Every update. And the Dodgers, for all their resources and brilliance, are still learning what it really means to build around a player like this. Because no team has ever had someone exactly like him. Not with this much talent, not with this much fame, not with this much strategic importance, not with this much symbolic weight. That is why Ohtani's Dodgers story still feels unfinished, even after all the milestones. The 50-50 season was historic. The first Dodgers home run mattered. The return to pitching timeline mattered. The impact on the team and the business of baseball matters. But the real ending has not been written yet. Because the final chapter is not about arrival. It is about fulfillment. Did the Dodgers simply sign the biggest star in the sport? Or did they build an environment strong enough to carry everything that comes with being Shohei Ohtani? That is the deeper question. And it is why every season with him feels bigger than a season. It feels like an audit of the entire organization. Their patience, their communication, their leadership, their ability to keep the room connected while one player exists at a level history barely understands. That is not normal pressure. That is Shohei Ohtani pressure. And now, it belongs to the Dodgers.